And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Two Guys and a Bible here on Fulfilled Radio. And it's back to Two Guys and a Bible. There's been a little bit of a hiatus over the last few weeks. William has been traveling the world, and I've been traveling some. And of course, had Larry fill in for William and had some other guests. And so it's good to be back with you, William, and it's good to have you back. I wish you would have chosen a little bit duller of a shirt, however.
Well, look, I rushed in there and I just pulled something out of the closet. So
Oh, yeah,
I didn't,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
Just
didn't
some
spend any
old
time
thing.
trying to select anything. I said,
Well,
I got to do something quick. I took a shower earlier and I said, I got to get something quick. And I just grabbed something.
yeah, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I got matching shorts to go with this.
Oh, well, it's a beautiful, beautiful shirt. I tell
Thank
you,
you. Thank you.
absolutely beautiful. I love it. So anyway, well, I thought we'd spend just a little bit of time, William, recapping and whatever you can share with us about your trip to South Africa. And then, of course, this last week, I was privileged to be in Montana uh, at the eschatology seminar up there.
Mhm.
And so, why don't you share with us a little bit what you can about your trip to South Africa?
Okay. Well, that was an interesting trip to say the least.
Mm.
First of all, our flight got canceled because of weather in Chicago. And the lucky thing is, usually when I'm flying like that to Africa, I pick an extra day. And normally, like if I'm going to Ghana, I would stay in a hotel in Washington, D.C. that night, the first day I get there, so that I rest
Yeah.
because it's going to be a long flight. And I do the same thing on the way back. So that helps. So I had scheduled a day sort of early. Um, and when they canceled the flight, they sent everybody home. Well, that was great for me because I needed the rest. So I
Mhm.
got a chance to have a good night's sleep at home instead of,
Yeah.
in Chicago. And but we ended up missing the Ethiopian flight, and we had to be put on I think it was KLM or something. And so we had to fly into Amsterdam instead of Addis Ababa going. And so they rerouted us through Amsterdam. We flew, long flight there. I don't know, it was 10, 11 hours.
Uh,
And then about 10, 11 hours, well, I'd say about 10 hours, maybe 11, into South Africa, but it was straight flight. And it was tiring. I think on the way back it just wore poorly or it wore out. I was fortunate enough on the way that there were three seats in the next aisle totally empty.
oh, wow.
And I climbed over there, got in the seat, went to sleep, and put a blanket. Leora didn't even know where I was. She was walking all over the plane trying to find me. And
Where
then
did
she
you
heard
go?
she heard something snore and looked around, and so she found me. But man, that was great. I've done that one other time where I had, just three seats to myself. But the flight to South Africa was just totally full, and so there's no way you're going to be able to do that
Yeah,
on that
yeah.
particular. But we got there. The weather was a little bit cool, so you had to have a jacket. This was their summertime. I think their summer is somewhere between May through August, or somewhere around that time. I mean, their winter time is May
Oh,
through
okay.
August, and so we had to have jackets on. But huge university at the University of South Africa in Pretoria. We did some touring there in terms of some of their history and the apartheid situation, some of the wars between the British, et
Mhm.
cetera. Climbed some huge mountains and had viewpoints and all. We went to some of the places where some of the memorial places as well, and that was very good. So it was a great cultural experience from
Mhm.
that. Um, and then, of course, I think I spoke on Wednesday, and after that, everything went downhill.
Uh-oh.
I think I offended just about everybody.
You were an equal opportunity offender, huh?
But anyway, I mean, the experience was just awesome because, everybody there was like a professor and, taught at a college, had their doctorates, earned doctorates degrees and everything. So it was good. And, for a while, I was feeling kind of out of place. But, after a while I got comfortable. So when I spoke, I mean, and had some good conversations, really. I really had some good conversations. So, I offended I talked a little bit about family as in the speech. And so I probably offended the people who didn't understand a male and a female. So, so that issue came up. So the LGBTQ people, I know it was somebody in the audience that was offended. And this was, I was in not the main lecture hall. I was in one of the breakout rooms, where we had a panel of people. So it was three of us who spoke. And I had 15 minutes to speak. And right before I went up to speak, they cut it to 10 minutes.
Oh.
I've been chopping on that lesson ever since I got there, trying to get it down to the 15 minutes. And then right before you get up to speak, they said 10 minutes because they were late getting us shuffled around and getting us to the place and I think we had little equipment, snafu, et cetera. And so by the time they said 10 minutes, and that just threw me into panic mode. I mean, really, I'm trying to figure out now, what am I going to leave here at this point? But I managed to get through the message okay. So I know that we had another person who was like they had some issues with the polyamory situation. They asked questions. The questions were good. I got more questions than anybody did in the session. There was one lady who spoke, and there was another gentleman who spoke about, I think he was talking about Mennonites or something. I could hardly understand him. But what really turned out well after that speech was the conversations that grew out of it. And so the guy who was one of the main guys, I think he works at some university in Pennsylvania. He's, like the leading chair there or something. But anyway, he along with another guy from the UK hosted the event. And when we went to lunch, we got to talking about eschatology. And so I was sharing some information with him, and we were having a conversation, I think, about the new heavens and new earth is where we started off, because as I was sharing with him that I understood all those things to be fulfilled, et cetera, he said, well, what do you do about the new heavens and new earth? And so as I was going through that and talking a little bit about Revelation, another guy came up, another professor came up, and he said, oh, Revelation. He says, I stopped to listen in on your conversation. I hope it didn't bother you because I'm teaching on the book of Revelation. I said, well, good. I said, I am too.
You are too, yeah.
And so we didn't get a chance to talk at that point. But later he came back and we had probably about a 30 or 35-minute conversation.
Cool.
And he was open and listening. He took the view that it was written after 70 AD.
Okay.
And he made some kind of argument. And I don't remember what the argument was, but it wasn't like he was deep into exegesis on it. It was just some principle that he was trying to reason from that. But in the process, we got into all the nitty gritty kind of text, et cetera. And he was just sitting back there. And then there was another preacher came over in a coat of many colors, I should say. He had on this nice looking jacket and he sat down, and there was two other ladies who sat down. And so we had the table, just the whole round table, where we were just talking about eschatology, the book of Revelation. And as I was going through and sharing with those concepts with him, I mean, it was like he had no responses. He was totally open and reflective in terms of what I was saying. And I thought it was a very good conversation. He was a nice guy on top of that. So that went well. I had another guy who had been having trouble with the Hebrew Israelites.
Oh.
And so he's out in Washington, D.C. So I think he studied at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. But anyway, he said, man, he said, these Hebrew Israelites, and it's like they're coming into the neighborhood and sort of intimidating some of the preachers. And this has happened before, because in Texas, there was a guy who contacted me and wanted me to come down there and talk to them as a result of, listening to me online and some of the
Yeah.
clubhouse things that I did before, but that never did materialize. They had made up the flyer and everything. It was a beautiful flyer. I said, yeah, I'd like to go down and talk with this kind of artwork, But anyway, that never did materialize. But I assured, I told him that I had, spoken with them. I'd had a debate with several of them, and that I would be willing to help him out. And so he was pretty glad about that. So we exchanged numbers, had a good conversation about that.
Cool.
The issue that kind of, which was the straw that broke the camel's back, they had a panel speaking one day, and I asked a question. And this was about women preachers. And so I asked him, and I think it was a lady preacher who got up and spoke that day. But it was a couple of men on the panel as well. So I just asked the question, about where's the authority for it, et cetera. I wasn't trying to pick a fight or anything. And when I was, going through some of the, just a few scriptures to let them know where I was coming from, there was this older lady who, she's very spry, and she was the one carrying the mic around. And so I had been setting up the question and everything and giving them a few details so they could understand where I was coming from. And then I noticed people in the room started getting agitated, some of these feminists in there, and there were some of those, and they were getting very agitated, trying to get me to, hush up. And so I was trying to hand her the mic. She was pushing it back to me. She said, no.
Talk some more. Talk some more.
Yeah, she told me to finish. So I ended up finishing that question. But after that, you could feel a little bit of coldness in the room. And the same guy that I told you we had the conversation about Revelation, he pulled me aside. Well, we were in the lunch line. We were getting our lunch. And he said, Bro Bill, he said, I want to talk to you a little bit about the women preachers. He said, have you looked at the word helpmeet in Genesis? And I said, well, I read something about that. He was telling me, well, it doesn't mean what most people say it means when you look up that word. And I said, I think I just come across something about that, but I didn't get deep into it. I said, I'll go back and look at it. And he was asking me if I was open to talk about it. I said, sure. I said, whatever you can show me, I'm willing to listen. And then he went to 1 Timothy chapter 3, and he said, well, are you familiar with that the definite article is not in the text where it talks about the wives for the deacons? And I said, well, I hadn't really paid that much attention to that and looked at it. I said, but I'll take a look at that, in the Greek. He said, so that indicated that it was just talking about women and not about wives. And I said, well, what about the elders? I said, is the definite article in there when it talks about the wives of the elders? He said, well, I don't know. I hadn't looked at it. I said, okay, well, maybe that's something that the both of us could look at. And we never did get back to that conversation, but I let him know that I was open and I would listen to whatever he had to say. It was just the coldness of the room after that. And Leoris actually said that there were some people when I was asking the question saying, oh, no. But I mean, the situation there. It's kind of a rainbow area. And so that really kind of irritated him and irritated a few. I know I stepped on some futurist toes. Not trying to, just do, dispensationalists and the feminists, and I think some transgender people, et cetera. But that was kind of the situation. So I don't know if they'll invite me back. I don't know. I was trying to figure out how could you do so much damage in 10 minutes?
It just takes talent.
But overall, it was really a great experience. It was a good learning experience, a good cultural experience. Met some great people, and they did send me, a note, wanting me to join the chat to talk about things and to share information from it. So maybe, and I did write the guy who invited me, and he didn't express anything. He was a pretty cool guy. They all were, for the most part. I think probably the people that got most offended was just a few ladies. But beyond that, it was pretty cool and professional all the way. With several of the professors came up to me and asked me for my information to, have further conversations. Whether they will or not, I'm not sure. But that's the way it turned out.
Well, that sounds really exciting, to be honest about it. I mean, anytime you can go and offend that many people, you've done good, right? But you know what that tells me, William, is something that we all know, and that is that in so many places in the higher levels of academia and politics, the radical left, the radicals of the world, and I'm talking moral radicals, political radicals that have such a such I'll just use the term such a deviant agenda. You know, they want to destroy the family. They want to destroy any kind of, pardon me, structured society that has any moral boundaries and what have you. And in reality, they're at least moral anarchists, to say the very least.
Mhm.
And in so many instances, they're just outright political anarchists as well, who want to disrupt uh, certainly democracies and republics, and they want to control the entire narrative in countries. They're not really truly in favor of freedom of expression, freedom of speech. If they get in
Yeah,
control,
that was the one thing that really kind of uh, irked me just a little bit. I'm saying, wait a minute now. Here are all these uh, intellectuals, people who are supposed to be, striving to learn and be open to as many possible views, etc. Not that they're going to open their head up and let you put anything in it, but the idea that these are scholars researching for knowledge, etc. And when I came across things, it was like, okay, we don't want to go in that direction. As a matter of fact, after I'd asked the question, there was one guy there. I forgot what country he was from in Africa, but man, he jumped me real hard. I couldn't understand because of his accent, and I wasn't really paying that much of attention to him. But he started on a rant after I sat down and just bam, 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 bam. And then another guy on the panel tried to respond to it. I guess he felt the need to respond, so he used Galatians 3:28, and this was his reply. He said, "Okay, in the Old Testament, men were head of their homes, and they were the head in leadership roles, etc." He said, "But in the New Testament, that's changed. We're all equal." And then he contradicted himself because he said, "Now in my home, I'm the I'm the head," but he used Galatians 3:28 to say we're all equal. So I said, "Okay." I was going to raise my hand. Leo said, "Ah, don't you do it," because you. And so I went up um, after the session was over to talk to him privately. I think he was from Nigeria, and so I went up to talk to him privately and share some concepts on Galatians 3:28. And he had another gentleman up there who had come up there because of what he said. And he said, "Man, give me that scripture you gave. Give me that scripture you gave." And I said, "Well, you might as well stay here. We're about to have a conversation about this." And he got that scripture and went right on back to his, he didn't want to hear nothing I had to say. But I talked to the guy and I told him, I said, "Well, I think you're misusing Galatians 3:28. I said, that text is about the inheritance. And I said, it's about people who under the law could not inherit in Israel. And I say even the women only in the case of that exception that's listed, with the daughters of Zelophehad, et cetera.
Correct.
But I said a slave couldn't inherit, a Gentile couldn't inherit, and a woman could not inherit. And I said what Paul was doing was giving an equality through Christ where everyone had the right to inherit. It didn't matter what his social status was. And he listened and he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, I'd like to talk to you about it." He was one of the ones that got my number as well. And I had to repeat that when I was dealing with the guy when we were talking about eschatology as well. And but that's kind of what came out of that. But it was just that guy who wanted no part of that conversation that really tickled me. He got away from there quick. But yeah, that happened. But that's one. And let me make this observation too. They had a guy from Oxford. I guess he was going to set me straight. And you could tell it was in the air. You know what I'm saying? You could feel that they were looking for every opportunity to say, "We got you," so to speak. So they had this guy. He was, I guess, the big guy, so to speak. from Oxford. He was a very learned person, very accomplished man, etc. But he came on talking about how we couldn't just take the Bible at face value or something to that effect. And he gave an example from the text that says, that talks about a camel going through the eye of a needle. And he says, now look at that, if you take that one, and I'm sitting here saying, now what has that got to do? But I understood what point he was trying to make. He was trying to say you can't take this literally.
Right.
If you do take it literally, then it means one thing. If you take it another way, it means another thing. But each of these passages have to be understood in the context in which you find them, et cetera. But I understood what he was trying to do. He was just trying to say, if you come here thinking that you can literally read this text and take it for what it says, that's not what it means. And boy, were they, it was like they were eating Campbell soup or something, when he was saying it. I sat there, I knew what he was trying to do. And, it was just one of those things that I thought they felt that they needed to do something like that because of what had happened. But other than that, it was a beautiful experience. It was really great culturally. And, every time I go to Ghana, I always talk about losing weight. Well, I ate every day heavy breakfast, and I thought that I had gained some weight, and I still didn't gain weight. I don't know what they put in the food here in America. Well, I do kind of know some.
Well, you do. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I do. And I ate everything I wanted to eat, not even as healthy as I eat when I go to Ghana. And I still did not gain any weight. I was just ready to see, okay, I didn't gain 10 pounds. And I didn't.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about putting stuff in the food. I have been hooked on these things. These are Cheetos, hot and spicy.
Oh, no. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've been hooked on them lately as a snack,
Uh-huh.
And this morning, Jan sent me a text. I'm sitting here, just working up storm. My phone dings and it's a text. And she got this note of this health notification of some of the supplements that are in that, some of the ingredients that are in that. They break down your immune system. They do this, they do that. And I go, well, great. I thought I had found a really cool snack, Now
I was banned just about everywhere except the United States.
I knew that when Kennedy got put in, I read some of the things that he was saying about all of the food colorings and the food additives that American producers put in that are literally outlawed in Japan and Great Britain and so many other countries. And you're going, okay, that man alive. And so this morning was just a perfect illustration of that. Here I am just chomping down on these Cheetos. Boy, they're great because me, I like hot and spicy stuff anyway. So I was just having a ball eating it. And I read her note and it's like, oh, great. Seemed like every time I find something that I think is going to be a relatively healthy snack, she comes up and discovers, no, this will give you cancer. This will give you brain dementia. This will do this. This will do that. So, okay, now I've got to find something else.
Yeah, you gotta go outside and eat grass, I guess.
Or as the old song says, I'll just go out and eat worms.
Yeah, we look at the boxes and the packages and everything, and you see some kind of bio whatever. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And
I know.
I listen to a guy, I'm always kind of checking health stuff anyway online, listen to, recipes and stuff for healthy foods. But I forgot the actual ingredient. But there was one guy on, and he was saying that there's something that they put in the water, and they put how much did he say? I don't know whether it was 200 something, some measurement that they put in this, and that will turn a male frog into a female frog. And he said, but do you know how much they put in the water? It was 3,000 of it compared to 200.
Oh, okay. Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, it's all about money when
Oh
it
yeah.
comes to the food production and everything else. Well, last week I had the privilege of going to Montana to the conference, eschatology conference there, and the conference it really was formulated around the eschatology of Genesis.
Hmm.
And I tell you, that was my very first very first time in that part of the country. I've seen pictures, Jack Scott has sent pictures, posted pictures on Facebook of the beauty of Montana as he's driving through the countryside,
Hmm.
uh, driving his truck and all that kind of stuff. It truly is just a stunningly beautiful part of America. Jan and I were returning from town one day, going back to our cabin, which had no air conditioning, by the way.
Mm.
Yeah, which are around 9 o'clock onward, you don't need air conditioning. I mean, the temperature just drops off the table
Yeah.
somewhere around 9 o'clock. But anyway, we were going back, and here are the mountains. We're just surrounded by this incredible, incredible scenery. And I commented to Jan, I said, babe, it's little wonder that this country has been labeled the the big sky country because the panorama that you're surrounded with just stretches on, even though the mountains are there, and the mountains just seem to stretch on forever. And they're so gorgeous. They're so incredibly beautiful. Um, you would have to have a super high dollar camera in order to take pictures to do the scenery justice. Your phones just simply don't do the justice. But pardon me, got there, had a wonderful meal with Tim Martin and his family. I did not realize that Tim Martin had 9 kids, and um, Steve Magua has 8 kids. So I didn't know any of that. And I had never met Tim face to face except when he was at our conference in 2012 at my debate
Hmm.
with Joel McDermott. Of course, Jeff Vaughn was there. Uh, but anyway, it was just such a pleasure. And you talk about being impressed with families. Tim Martin and Steve Magua's families are just, I don't know of another word. They're just incredible.
Hmm.
So highly disciplined, so highly um, wonderful temperaments, and totally involved in everything.
Hmm.
His wife and daughters helped with the food. One of his daughters sang, and wonderfully talented young girl. And Steve Magua's family was doing all of the electronic stuff. I mean, they were all at a table, and my goodness gracious, they all know this stuff. They all know the electronics of the cameras, the mics, and live streaming, and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, man, alive, I can barely turn on my computer of a day, and here are every one of these kids that are doing this, and very, very effectively, I might, and efficiently. So anyway, I was just blown away. That got to meet so many people. The conference was really labeled, I think, as a vacation conference. And the idea being that, okay, Whitehall, Montana sits in the middle of basically nowhere. It's about 31 miles from Butte, Montana, which is more of a metropolitan area. Wonderful city. We got to go over there. But anyway, they labeled it, go on a vacation, come to Montana and see the sights, and then attend the conference. And I would say there were between 60 and 70 people that were there. So many of the people were people that I've corresponded with. And in fact, I'll do this, I'll share this. It just blew me away, literally blew me away, because I had so many people coming up to me and saying, uh, boy, I watch your morning musings. And it's just, a blessing. So I thought, boy, I'm hearing that so much. So at the beginning of one of my presentations, I just asked him, I said, I'm real curious. I want to know how many of you either have or do watch my morning musings programs. And William, everyone there except 2 or 3 people
Hmm.
watched the morning music. musings.
That's
And I
cool.
said, that's what I said. That is totally awesome. And I said, shame on the two or three of you that don't watch my show. But I was so honored and humbled by that. It's just wonderful, that so many people tune in. And of course, many of them came up to me and said, "Yeah, we watch William Bell too. We watch him just like we watch you. So you're being watched as well." And of course, you know that. But I had been asked, I was asked my position, on covenant creation that Tim and Jeff and Steve promote so heavily. And pardon me, when Steve and Tim initially contacted me and asked me if I'd be willing to speak on the conference, I said, "Well, I certainly will, but you have to understand, I'm not a proponent of covenant eschatology, as you guys are teaching it. I try to be open-minded about it. You've made some good points. You raised some really good, pardon me, hermeneutical issues that I think are very, very important." But I said, I don't accept the full view, but I'm open. And they said, that's fine. You don't have to, you don't have to be a proponent. Pardon me. So that was the grounds. Uh, I really learned an awful lot of things. I particularly appreciated a lot of the things that Tim said. Uh, he had he did an excellent job of laying a lot of things out systematically,
Mhm.
very, very coherently, very, very cohesively. And so I appreciate it. Steve Mugla was the same identical way. And I thought Jeff brought out some good points as well. And so Jan asked me one evening after we left, she said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I have to legitimately say that I learned some things. I had some things clarified. On the other hand of that, I had a few issues raised that are of equal, I didn't use the word negative strength, but they raise an equal weight of questioning
Mhm.
over the questions that I had answered. And it was good to get some questions answered that I had wondered about before, that I did not fully understand.
Mhm.
And it even allowed me, by the way, since I've been back, one person, well, I made a video for Monday giving my report on the conference. And on my YouTube, in the comments under my review, I had different people saying, "You shouldn't have been there. Those people are heretics. You're giving your credence to those people, and they're all false teachers." Now, mind you, they didn't make one single argument about why they're heretics. They didn't offer one single scripture. And then they made an accusation. Well, the accusation they made, and I won't even go into it, but the accusation that made was a misunderstanding that I personally had before going,
Mhm.
but that was cleared up quite emphatically, as a matter of fact. And so I pointed out to this fella, I won't even call him a gentleman because he certainly didn't conduct himself as a gentleman, but I said, "You're making a false accusation." I heard it from them specifically, correcting that misconception. And of course, you and I, William, down through the years, as we've been part of this preterist movement for so long, it has been our experience. we Let me see if I can find my little puffer here. I don't know why I'm having. Well, I do know why I'm having so much trouble with my voice, because I talk so much and laugh so much in Montana. But I thought I had one of my puffers right here. Oh, here we are. Give me 1 second here, folks. I apologize. But you and I have dealt with so many people, and one of the things that we've had to do as much of as anything
Mhm.
is to correct misunderstandings or false accusations about what we as preterists believe.
Right.
And so that's what I was seeing in this in these comments under my review of people who obviously had not listened to any of the speeches. Had
Mhm.
they actually listened to the speeches, they would have had some of their accusations completely falsified. But they just came across as those people who are willing to misrepresent because they don't like a doctrine or they're threatened by a doctrine. And I told Tim on the way back to the airport, he asked me my impression. And he asked me if I felt that there was anything presented that just completely turned me off. And I said, absolutely not. I didn't. Did I did I hear some things that I have questions about? Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I'm gonna,
Mhm.
cut them off or shut the door at all. As I said, this is to me, this is part of the learning process.
Right.
And when and that's what you were saying there a little bit ago. When you when you're dealing with subject that you've never investigated before, I suppose that the normal human response is, oh my goodness, no, 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 no. But when I read their first edition book, the one thing that came across to me repeatedly was their appeal to proper hermeneutic.
Mhm.
And that continues to appeal to me. And so when I'm confronted with when I'm confronted with a doctrine that is being based upon, in my understanding, proper hermeneutic, then I think it behooves me to at least look a little bit closer. Now, if I then find logical fallacies, if I then find a deviance from the solid hermeneutic, then that's one thing. But to reiterate, when I see that here's the path of that the hermeneutic is taking me, and that hermeneutic is solid and it's sound and it's valid, then I feel like I'm duty bound as a good student, not just of eschatology, but I'm duty bound as a student of knowledge to follow that hermeneutic wherever it might lead.
Yeah.
So, I've had people ever since Monday, ever since the conference, uh, emailing me privately. Well, you shouldn't have been there. You shouldn't have been there. You're giving credence to this and that and the other. And if you don't agree with them, you should have said so. Well, I did tell them that. They knew that right up front.
Yeah.
It's just like when you and I have spoken at countless lectureships sponsored by folks outside of our regular fellowship. And people have accosted us and they've accused us and they've condemned us for that. And my response has always been when I'm invited and I'm allowed to say what I believe conscientiously without any restrictions, guess what? I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the people where I went didn't subscribe to covenant eschatology.
Obviously not.
And yet they didn't put any restriction on me in terms of what I talked about. So and I knew that I was going where they had all kinds of views, etc. I just considered it a learning experience, and that's what it was.
Well, it's both
They
a
had
learning experience and an opportunity to present what you believe to
to
be the
teach.
truth.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll
So
never forget, William, years and years ago, when I was still at the congregation here, I had gone to a lectureship, spoken at a lectureship, the usual 2 or 3 times. When I came back, I was giving a presentation. Well, the that seminar was not sponsored by Church of Christ folks, and so I was sharing this and that and the other. Well, one of the members of the congregation, you will remember his name. His name is Grant Jackson. Wonderful guy,
yeah.
just a great, great guy. Well, he spoke up and he said, well, I just don't know if I really like the idea of you going and speaking at places that aren't Church of Christ. And I said, well, Brother Jackson, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I really do. Been there, done that. but I said, I want to ask a question of the congregation. And of course, I wasn't attacking him in any way. He and I always got along famously, still do. We don't correspond much anymore, but nonetheless, I said, when I'm given the opportunity to go and to speak unfettered, unrestricted, total freedom to speak what I believe to be the truth, should I go and speak what I believe to be the truth, or should I stay behind these four walls and throw and lob missiles
Mm-hmm.
and attacks against those people that I disagree with on a lot of things? Two of our ladies, neither one of whom hardly ever spoke up. I mean, they basically never said a word. Now they might after class, but they never did in class.
Mm-hmm.
They both spoke up at the same identical time and said, well, that's a no-brainer. You got to go. and everybody's turning around looking at them. Did they actually speak up? It was an absolutely hilarious moment. And, in subsequent time, Grant even changed his mind.
Mm-hmm.
He said, when you got the opportunity to go and you've got the opportunity to preach the truth without fetter, without restriction, you got to go.
Yeah, you
So,
never know when that may be the very time that somebody's ears and eyes, are open or come open to where they see something. And it starts, many times from just a seed of truth.
that's exactly right. And I can't, it's happened to you. I know it has.
Yeah.
The number of times at these conferences, people come up to me afterwards privately and say, I know you're from the Church of Christ. What about this? Can I ask you about that? And I'd share it with them candidly, without reservation, of exactly what I believe. And because it's a seminar setting, I've literally never had anybody get mad at me except one time at a Church of Christ lectureship in California where I said something that was not quite traditional. And I had two or three men come up to me and tell me I was guilty of heresy, I was teaching false doctrine, and that I was doomed. That was at a Church of Christ lectureship.
Hmm.
So
I've had more people in the Church of Christ, make statements like that.
oh, absolutely.
Than anywhere else.
No question whatsoever about that. So, and anyway, the conference up there was absolutely fantastic. They're already planning a conference for next year. Tim told me just today in a private message that they're going to be talking to you about becoming one of the speakers for next year.
Mm-hmm.
So, William, if things turn out, there's a possibility that you and I will be going to Montana, and there's a possibility that you and I will be going to Australia. So things are lining up to be a very, very busy year for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope I've got the health and fortitude and what have you to be able to keep up with that kind of a schedule.
Yeah.
So, I'm not a spring chicken. I told Al Person when he said, "Oh yeah, we want you to come back next year, and we want to go on a 3-city tour. We want you." And he said, "We need 2 other guys." And I said, "Well, you need William Bell, and Joel Rosenauer will probably already be over here." And Joel's an excellent speaker. I don't know if you've heard him or not, but Joel is.
Don't think I've heard him.
Yeah, Joel is an excellent speaker, very well read, very gentle, very humble guy. Communicates extremely well. So anyway, Al said, well, we want this 3-city tour. And he originally just said me. And I said, no. I said, Al, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I said, I cannot go to one city, speak 3 times, fly to another city the next day, speak 3 times, fly to another city the next day and speak 3 times. I said, I can't do that. I said, I'm recommending we have at least 2 other speakers. So he was open to that. So that is what we're working on. That is what is tentative. It's not set in stone, but yeah, things are looking up quite a bit for next year, insofar as activity is concerned. And so we will see how things go. Want to ask the audience to keep us in your prayers for health, and well-being to be able to do those things. William, so many doors are opening. You know this, I know this. It is so downright humorous when we read comments from those who stand opposed to covenant eschatology. And they say, well, covenant eschatology is not growing. No, nobody's coming to this. And you and I both know anybody that's involved in the movement at all on any level, any active level, they know that is so nonsensical. I mean, it's just literally ridiculous. Now, I've got to tell this story, William. Doesn't have anything to do with the lectureship, but when they invited me to go up there and speak, okay, uh, they said, now you're going to have one day that you will not be involved. And so do you want to just, you and Jan, just go sightseeing? Or would you be interested in going trout fishing?
Oh.
Yeah. Hello. I said, I want to go trout fishing. And they said, well, look, we know a guy. He's got a lodge. They'll take you on a guided, with a guide, some of the best trout fishing in Montana. Mm. And I said, oh, yeah, count me in. Okay, so here's what happened. Tim contacted me. He said, Don, we got it all set up. You got one day to go trout fishing. It will be guided. I've got this friend. He owns this lodge. And he said, I told him I was calling in some favors and he's going to take you and Jan fishing. Well, Jan didn't want to fish. So anyway, he confirms it. He contacts me back, said, Don, it's all set. The very next day, William, he sent me a flyer from that lodge. Mm-hmm. Would you like to guess what the normal charge is for one day of guided fishing at that lodge?
Couple of grand.
$4,750 for one day. I immediately texted Tim back and I said, you got to cancel this. I said, no, I cannot even begin to afford this. This is so far above my pay scale. I can't even imagine it. And he wrote back, he said, no. He said, I'm calling in a favor. This is on us. He volunteered to do this free of charge. I said, well, the price is right. We'll go. Okay. So we go out there in the middle of nowhere, William. Mm-hmm. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful country. And we see this river. It's called the Madison River, crystal clear water. And so we get there, and the fellow who was in charge wasn't present at the moment, but there were a couple of guys there. So I started talking to them. I said, hey, guys, I said, catching any fish? And they said, oh, man alive, said, we have been catching fish like you would not believe. We can't get a line in the water fast enough, and said, we're catching big ones. These are not small. We're catching big fish. I'm like, oh, awesome. I caught 3 fish.
Good size?
Well, here's the deal. We're floating along, and, the guide had showed me how to fish for those trout. Mm-hmm. Totally different from the way I used to fly fish in Arkansas for bass. So anyway, he's giving me all these instructions. And, when you're fly fishing, you give it this and you give it that. And you don't expect anything on the back. You go out front. Mm-hmm. So here we are floating along. Oh, and I got to say this too. Before we started, Jan asked the guide, how deep is this water? Because Jan doesn't even take a deep bath. She can't swim. 2 times in her life, she almost drowned because of the negligence of other people. She just doesn't like water. Mm-hmm. And the guy goes, maybe up to your waist. He said, you can stand up in anywhere we're going to be. And she says, oh, okay, I'm good. Okay, so anyway, here we are floating along. I'm giving it this and giving it this and what have you. And I go like this, and I go, what? And it was a fish. I caught a fish on the backswing. You just don't do that. Oh my goodness.
It
But
sounds like it was very exciting.
well, it was exciting. That turned out to be about a 17-inch brown trout.
Mm,
And the guy just went on and on about it. He said, Mr. Preston, I got to tell you, brown trout are extremely rare in this river. And he said, this is a really, really big brown trout.
mm.
And he said, I'll tell you this, I've got people that come from way up in Canada to fish this river for nothing but browns. They're not interested in rainbows at all. They want to catch browns.
Mhm.
And they fish 3 or 4 days at a time and won't catch one single brown. And he said, your very first fish is a brown and it's a big one. Well, the next fish I caught was a little white fish about that big. The third one I caught was a little rainbow about that big.
Mm.
And so that was my fishing expedition. But it was absolutely fantastic. We saw wildlife. There were deer standing in the water at the edge of the river. There was an osprey nest up in a tree at the edge of the river.
Mhm.
There were pelicans, there were geese, oh man, and of course, there's no one around. Well, there was another boat that was floating down, but it was an absolutely fantastic experience, probably once in a lifetime type of experience. And, maybe if Tim uh, and Steve and Jeff have a conference next year, maybe we can go mud wading or something like that. I don't know. But nonetheless, it was an awesome experience. It really, really was. And the fellowship, as usual, was wonderful. And I didn't get to hear every single one of the lectures. Jan and I woke up one morning and our allergies were just absolutely raging. So we went back to the lodge early and crashed and burned. But nonetheless, overall, for those of you who might be thinking about next year, let me encourage you to do that. Tim said they're already thinking about a topic or a theme for next year, and that is the eschatology of the prophets. So that's a wide ranging, obviously, wide open type of topic. So that's kind of my report on the Montana lectureship. Once again, it was a wonderful experience. Got to see a lot of people, and to see a lot of people that
Oh, you froze, Don. I don't know what happened to your camera, but
what
for the moment you are frozen.
really?
And
No, you're frozen now.
hopefully,
I'm on my
there
screen.
you
I'm
go. You're
active.
back. You're free. Your
No,
camera is freezing, or something is freezing up.
your camera is frozen now. How interesting. There you are. You moved a little bit. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Yep. Looks like I lost. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm back. You were freezing up before.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. So anyway, do you have any closing comments, William?
No, it sounds like you had a great time. I will take some time to listen to some of the lectures that were done. I've been so busy around here. I got roofs I'm replacing, and all kind of stuff, doing water remediation. It's just a ton of stuff that's going on. So hopefully when some of that, wanes, I'll be fine. I think this is the second roof I've replaced this year.
Oh my goodness gracious, that's
And
terrible.
yeah, but this is the last of four that I've done over a few years. And so hopefully they'll last, longer than maybe that I'll be around.
Last longer than you.
Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that I finally got those things, behind me. So I've just got small things. But other than that, I mean, it's
Well,
fine.
I've been the same way. I've been so busy, tied up, trying to get caught up with correspondence and writing and what have you that I haven't got to do an awful lot. Now, here's what I would like to do for next week, William. I would like to focus, and we've been talking about the Abrahamic inheritance coming at the end of the law of
Hmm.
Moses, and the nature and the identity of the law of Moses, or excuse me, the Abrahamic covenant. What I would like to do is talk about the Abrahamic covenant in regard to the doctrine of replacement theology and what the Abrahamic covenant implies and that is that the only interim measure that was in God's plan was, in fact, the Mosaic covenant. It
Mhm.
wasn't the church, it was the Mosaic covenant. And we'll talk about that in response to the charge of, quote, replacement theology that is made against us by the dispensational world. So, why don't we cover that next week?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Well, in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, we will cut it off just a tad early this evening, and that's all right. I've got supper waiting, I think. At least I hope I do. I am hungry. And so with that, we're going to say good night and God bless.
All right, good night.